In the spring of 1890, two farmers were getting back riding a horse across the southern Arizona desert when they experienced an extremely unusual animal. A winged monster, resembling a huge alligator with an extremely elongated tail and immense pair of wings, according to a report from the time. The animal was identified as a living and breathing pterodactyl, a flying reptile that was thought to have vanished around 150 million years ago during the late Jurassic. Please subscribe to my channel if you like this type of content, as the more people follow my channel, the more it motivates me to make great content, and as often as possible, thank you. On Sunday, April 20th, 1890, the two met in a remote desert between the Whetstone and Huachuca Mountains, a few miles north of the border between the United States and Mexico and west of the San Pedro River. Today, the city of Sierra Vista sits in the valley between the mountain ranges. However, white settlers were just beginning to arrive in Arizona in 1890, just 4 years after the Apache Wars had ended, and they were establishing ranches and homesteads around Fort Huachuca, the largest army base in the state. Tombstone, famously used as the scene of the 1881 gunfight at the OK Corral, was the closest town, about 20 miles to the northeast. According to a report that appeared in the Tombstone epitaph on the following Saturday, the strange creature that the ranchers encountered was identified as the Tombstone Pterodactyl, also known as the Tombstone Thunderbird. The creature appeared to be exhausted and resting on the ground when the two ranchers approached it. The ranchers rushed at the creature with their Winchester rifles after the first shock of wild amazement. It took to the sky right away, but because it was exhausted, it could only fly a short distance before going back to the ground. An exciting chase of several miles was the ranchers' response to the animal's erratic flight. The ranchers opened fire on the creature as soon as they were within rifle range, as cowboys do. The ranchers were able to keep out of the animal's way and fire a few more well-directed shots after the exhausted and wounded animal turned on them as they approached. The monster partially rolled over and remained motionless, the report states. The men carefully drew nearer, their ponies grunting with fear, and observed that the animal was dead. After continuing to examine the animal, the ranchers revealed some startling measurements. The creature's body, according to the epitaph, measured an impossible 92 feet long. Its head was around 8 feet in length. Its eyes were as extensive as supper plates, and its jaws were set with thick lines of sharp teeth. With some difficulty, the men extended one of the creature's wings, which were covered in a thick, almost transparent membrane. Although the creature lacked any feathers or hair, the smooth skin had been easily penetrated by their bullets. The men noted that the creature had 2 legs, similar to those of a bird. They estimated that the creature had a wing that was 78 feet long, giving it a total wingspan of about 160 feet from tip to tip, the same as a modern Boeing 767 passenger jet. They removed one wing's tip and brought the enormous beast home because they were unable to move it. A few days later, one of the ranchers rode into Tombstone to get supplies, and a group of several prominent men who would go into the desert to find the animal before it is mutilated. The plan was to take off the skin of the pterodactyl and send the hide back east for eminent scientists of the day to examine it. 6 days after the initial encounter, the gang set out. They never appear to have returned with the creature. Or on the other hand, maybe there is. In the years that followed, there were rumors about a picture that had been taken when the creature came back to Tombstone. The men appeared to have posed in front of the creature after nailing it to a barn. Witnesses recalled seeing the image numerous times, possibly in the Tombstone epitaph. That could not have been the case, though. According to the newspaper's archives, no photographs were published in 1890 by the epitaph. The most widely used image of the Tombstone Thunderbird is the one currently on screen, and was made by Chris Smith, but this image is most definitely a deliberate fake. There are a few other phony photographs available for use, the vast majority of them considerably less persuading than Chris's. In 1930, significant Horace Chime, a previous U.S. officer, retold the narrative of the headstone pterodactyl in his book On the Old West Coast. A short while from that point onward, as per another story, an anonymous old cattle rustler moved toward a pressman in Gravestone and let him know that he was one of the farmers who had experienced the animal. He claimed that the initial newspaper report had been exaggerated, but that it was partially accurate. The two men had taken shots at and pursued the animal, yet had not brought down or killed it. Their ponies had been scared, and the men had been terrified, so they let it fly away. A few years later, in May 1963, writer Jack Pearl wrote an article titled "Monster Bird That Carries Off Human Beings" for the magazine Saga. Pearl retold a few evidently obvious stories of experiences with pterodactyl-like animals, including one that he dated for 1886, yet appears to allude to the story from 1890. Pearl claims that 2 prospectors brought a dead pterodactyl into Tombstone on a wagon, nailed it to a wall, and took a picture with it in front of a group of 6 men. Although this appears to be the very first mention of a photograph, it was not the last. In their book Thunderbirds, Mark A. Hall and Mark Lee Rollins revealed the following. Numerous naturalists, authors, and magazine correspondents claim to have seen this image in America's living legends of giant birds. However, attempts to confirm it failed. In 1966, the then proofreader of the Gravestone Tribute said he had looked through the paper's records and tracked down no photo, so, assuming that it existed, it had no association with the paper. One more interesting story came up. The Tombstone Pterodactyl story from 1890 was retold in 1969 by Old West magazine. In 1970, a reader by the name of Harry McClure wrote to the magazine to inform it that he had met the two ranchers and had been told the story. McClure says that the ranchers did see the massive creature in the desert, but its wingspan was only 30 feet instead of 160. According to the 1930s account, their terrified horses refused to follow. They did shoot at the creature, but it was out of range. As a result, the creature escaped, and the ranchers went to Tombstone without a story, not even a wingtip, let alone a dead animal. However, an embellished story was published by a reporter at the Tombstone Epitaph, but no photograph was ever taken. Could a pterodactyl or similar pterosaur have survived in Arizona into the late 19th century?